An outstanding movie of great depth and just great visuals and audio from the Japanese master Masaka Kobayashi as Samurai Rebellion. Oh my, absolutely love this movie, one of my favorite samurai movies, starring the great Toshiro Mifune. And here he is playing a character who is just right up his alley, perfect character for him, of a vassal, a swordsman, who is dealing with powers beyond him, and he wants to rebel, as in the title. And you'll see what happens when you watch this movie. Now, Kobayashi had already done a couple of other movies, and in the top 100 on IMDb is Harakiri, a beloved favorite movie of a lot of people. I am surprised that Samurai Rebellion isn't equally as loved, even though it does get very high ratings other places, like an 8.3 out of 10 on IMDb. Kobayashi made this movie after Harakiri and after Kwaidan and his famous trilogy, the Human Condition trilogy. So you could say this is late and mature Kobayashi, which I think it definitely is. Here are the masters in control of every aspect of the movie: shot making, editing, camera moves, I believe acting, and he understands how his story and his form fit together. Now, I have to be reductive when reciting the plot, which I'll do very quickly for an American or Western audience, and I know this movie has a lot more complexity once you start to think about Japanese culture, power dynamics, government, and history, and so on. But basically, Mifune plays Sasahara, a swordsman who's a vassal and taking care of border patrol for a clan, and he's beholden to a lord of the clan, who is a sort of a bald, nasty, unprincipled man, as we come to find out. And the Lord has a bunch of servants who are bossing people around, in a sense, and he tells this family, headed by Sasahara, that your son has to marry this lady, Lady Ichi, a mistress of this lord. The family is reluctant to take her in. She's kind of a, in English terms, a fallen woman. She's had a child, but yet she's been kicked out of the household of the Lord. Well, they take her in. She has a sad story about what actually happened to her, why she was kicked out of the Lord's house. The son, Yogoro, really falls in love with her, and Sasahara admires their marriage. He wishes he had a marriage like they have, and his wife is in the picture, so he actually says this out loud a couple times. He wishes he had a marriage like his son does. Sasahara retires from being the vassal, and his son takes over family matters, family affairs. Sasahara, I think, is a little unfulfilled. He says that several times in the movie. He doesn't know what his life is about, why he's been living. He also has a best friend named Asano, a swordsman who matches him in terms of ability level. This character is played by Tatsuya Nakadai, who you've seen in Harakiri. You've seen them both, actually, Mifune and Nakadai, in other movies, like, for example, Yojimbo. If you're familiar to Japanese samurai movie fans. Anyway, the plot thickens, and every single character in this movie is torn in various ethical, moral directions when the Lord, the unjust Lord unprincipled, demands that Lady Ichi come back and raise his heir because his original heir dies, and so the heir, the son that she had, is still a part of his household. He demands it comes back into the household. Well, Yogoro, Sasahara don't want to give her up. They actually really like her a lot, and it would seem to be kidnapping on the Lord's part to, one, force Lady Ichi into their household, as they've already taken her in, but two, then take her back out of the household. But what are they going to do? Are they going to rebel? Because if they do, violence is going to ensue. They might die. And they know that. We know that when they're watching the movie. And so a lot of characters who are their allies, friends, and especially family members from within their family end up going against them. Theme-wise, this movie is about what fulfills a man, Sasahara, what gives meaning to men. Partly it's to defend themselves, their clan, their identity, and so on. Another theme coming up here is older generation versus younger generation. You'll see that pop up throughout the movie. Sasahara has two sons. One goes one way, one goes the other. And which is better? The movie openly asks that question, especially in regard to the power dynamics. One might be more obedient towards the Lord, whether the Lord is unjust or not. One is more rebellious, perhaps. And who is better, who is right or wrong? These ethical questions come up throughout the entire film. And in the end, the movie is about one of Kobayashi's interests. What do you do when they're tyranny, when they're tyrants, especially in a very traditional society where obedience is a prime value? Maybe Kobayashi is talking about 1960s Japanese culture as well, but what do you do when you must obey and disobedience is punishable by death? Now, one thing that makes this movie absolutely outstanding, besides the performances and the soundscape, Kobayashi is a master of soundscapes, or forms. Forms. You get classical grammar and some new modern film grammar, 1960s, that looks a little bit like Sergio Leone mixed in here. And you get so many great forms, shots that show you the meaning, show you the characters' dynamic, show you the psychology of the characters by where they're placed within the frame and how they're relating to each other within the frame. Kobayashi is an absolute master of forms and then cutting to new shots that demonstrate new dynamics within the story. He will zoom into characters' faces in the right moments. He will place characters above, below, right, left, on extreme ends of the frame, in the middle. He will use every sort of technique you can imagine in 1967 to tell his story visually in a formalistic way. And yet sometimes he will break in with new film grammar, new techniques. And so you get this mix of old and new, the classical, so-called, and the modern, which is definitely what's going on with the movie thematically, story-wise. I mean, liberal values, individual rights, women's rights, those are coming up in this movie all over the place, versus obedience to the capital city of Edo, to lords, loving your clan and, honoring it. Traditional family sorts of themes coming up in this versus individual values. Well, that comes up in the film grammar in a way all throughout this movie, and it's absolutely wonderful dynamic. This movie is a slow build up to the ending, the final 20 to 30 minutes, so the first hour and a half of it you'll have to wait and watch how all these characters wrangle over a difficult moral and political situation. Then you have a 30-minute ending, which is typical samurai fare, yet beautifully filmed by Kobayashi. My opinion of this movie is just as good as Harikiri. I might even personally like it a little bit better than it, because I just love Mifune, for one thing. I love the story. I think it applies. Anybody from any culture can relate to this story. It is palpable and real, and you feel the evil presence of the tyrants in this movie and how they lord it over their subjects. I just love the way that's dealt with in this movie. There's very strong moral messaging in this movie, by the way. Now, what do you think of Samurai Rebellion? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Have a great day.